and thanks for being here with us today. I'm Leanna Heighton. I'm the Associate Editor of Education Week Teacher. And now you've already had a chance to meet our 5 very impressive panelists who are today's award winners. And now we're going to have a chance to actually hear a little bit more about their classroom practices and how they engage and support students from diverse backgrounds. So we have Darnell, Lisa, and Lawrence, Robert, and Anna. But I'm actually going to start with you, Lawrence. So we just saw your video, and it seems from that like you have sort of an unconventional way of even just thinking about what school is for. Rather than content, you're really pushing things like social justice, giving back to the community, empowerment, overcoming stereotypes. So I'm hoping maybe you can talk a little bit about why you've chosen to focus on the social justice framework in your classroom and what you consider your job as an educator really to be.
Well, I mean, I came through UCLA program and they have a social justice TP background, but honestly, I don't I mean, I guess that's the label you can use it, but I'm more of a humanity kind of like equal rights, human rights, basic rights kind of thing. And so overall, one of the things that I do is based on some of the experiences that I went through and a lot of the experiences that the communities that I serve go through, we just put it together and kind of think like, okay, well, where are they coming from and what are they experiencing and how do I help them navigate through those experiences? So a lot of the things that might be the social justice type stuff, it's them coming in with, hey, you know, this is what's going on, right? And a lot of people will tell me, well, aren't they too young to do that? And I say, you know, if that's what you think, however, they're not too young to experience poverty, violence, and hunger, you know? And so it's one of those things where as a teacher, I feel like it's a necessity to give them a set of tools to navigate through that. And definitely, I make it a point to bring about a counter narrative because they're already hit with dominant narrative, K4, 6, whatever, what their experience is, and then giving that counter narrative, let them come up with their own ideas of what and how we should rule. So I'm just giving them tools. That's it.
Excellent. Anna, one thing that they didn't get to in your video, but you and I have talked about a little bit, is you use something called Reservation Ambassadors. Can you tell everyone what those are and why you do that in your classroom?
Yeah, so the beginning of the story is that the reservation that we live on has 3 tribes, and one of the tribes is located in a valley, was originally located in a valley south of where we live, and I have a friend who teaches down there, and she had done some reading with one of her classes, her senior classes, and they thought that all reservations were terrible. They had this book that had sort of reinforced some stereotypes and things, and she emailed me and said, what do you think I should do? You know, because I know these aren't really true, or that they're not always true in every case. And so I said, well, you know, how about if I come down there with some students, because I think that relationships can break down stereotypes. And so I did. I picked 5 kids, both Indian and non, and we went down there and we met with the class that had the questions, and we, you know, tried to explain some things and to share some really positive stories from reservation life with them to try to break down some of those stereotypes. And so it was like the first annual Reservation Ambassadors, and wow. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, what better way than hearing it from other kids? That's exactly fascinating. So Robert and Lisa, you both in your videos, you talked about how you create classroom rules a little differently than other people do. Lisa, you call them social contracts, and Robert, you call them community agreements, but the idea is that your kids actually make them. Can you both talk a little bit about how this technique falls under the umbrella of culturally responsive pedagogy? Maybe you want to start, Robert?
Sure. It's really, really important, I think, that beginning in kindergarten, a child's first sort of formal year of education, that they come on into this experience of the school world and feel at home as much as they possibly can. And so what we wind up doing in kindergarten, and I work across my grade level as a team, and so we're all sort of working on these community agreements together. In my classroom specifically, they're agreements that I've thought about what it is that I would like the children to decide upon as being our community agreements. They're generating the ideas themselves because they know, and I hope that I create the conditions where I can sort of facilitate this process where they feel, you know what, I do know something about being together in a community. It's something that I do at home, for example, with my family. We have ways of interacting at home, and so I'm bringing some of those ideas into the classroom. And it's really important for me to help those children feel that, these ideas that I'm bringing from home actually have a place here in school. My teacher is hearing what it is that I'm saying, and look, he's writing it up on the whiteboard right now. And so it's sitting down together and really working through what it is that we want from one another in order to create the space that's going to be this safe space where we will all learn and grow together. And I think it's a really important first lesson for kindergartners.
How about you, Lisa?
Well, I think it's actually very apropos that as a secondary teacher, I'm following, this kindergarten teacher. We saw these videos of these beautiful children, wide-eyed, ready to learn, and certainly that's due to Robert, but I think when they come, they're younger and they might have that energy, and then you see them in high school, and it's like they've lost this wonder. Why? That's such a great question to ask. They should have that same wonder, that youthful desire to learn, because there's people that are listening, that are in this room, that are lifelong learners, and we love to learn. We love to go to museums and learn. So I use the social contract as a way to create that same wonder or that interest and engage the students in their own learning, letting them take responsibility and saying, this is going to be your space. We're here together for 2 hours, sometimes a day. We have to be able to agree. It cannot just be, I am the authority figure, and therefore you're going to do as I say because I think these rules are important. So it's a way of creating that community, sharing, getting them to be responsible, and to see what's important to them. For example, a lot of times in secondary, you have rows, and the teacher lectures and the students take notes. And if in fact I'm going to say something really interesting, we were even doing that sitting here. It was like, oh, that was really good. That was, you make those comments, you engage, and sometimes people are very comfortable. That individuality of just listening and then raising their hand and taking a turn. And other people love that dialogue, and they love to, and that's fabulous in the classroom. So we have to agree that that's going to be okay, and you're not going to get in trouble or written up because you're talking out of turn. If in fact that's something that we can agree on. That's just one example of, I guess, how you would say it would be culturally responsive, because some people, that dialogue, it could be a familial thing that they learn in their families. We look at how we eat dinners or family, holiday celebrations. Some are very quiet and everybody takes their turn at the table, and others, it's survival of the fittest. And so I think with that idea of the social contract and creating those rules, they hold each other accountable, and they hold me accountable too, and that's good.
And this idea of seeing individuals is something, Darnell, that we saw through your video and your mantra sort of kids before content. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you, and in an era of teacher accountability and get through the standards and push, how do you stay true to that?
I actually got that I borrowed that term from my mentor, Bill Johnson, who talks about Sonia Nieto all the time. But in his book, and also when he was teaching us how to be teachers, he not only said kids over content, but he modeled that in his interactions with me. So going through college and learning to become a teacher, he would always tell me life takes precedent over anything that we're learning inside of the classroom. So with my students, it's always about building roles and relationships with them first, and getting to know them and their interests and their strengths, and then using that information from understanding their talents, their interests, who they are as learners, and using that to inform my curricula and how I plan lessons, how I plan instructional activities, how I plan units, how I plan the overall curriculum, so they can see themselves in the curriculum. And once they see themselves in the curriculum and they see that their lived experiences are anchored in the curriculum, they feel like they have input, and there's more engagement, and there's more buy-in. And that leads to students not just playing school and doing tasks just to be doing them, but actually learning, challenging themselves to think, challenging themselves to question, challenging themselves to deconstruct things that are accepted as true. So that's the reason why I start with getting to know my students as individuals first.
And Robert, you talk about getting to know about your students' home lives and cultures, and I think that's something that all of you do, but maybe, Robert, you can tell us, you know, as expressive as kindergartners are, they don't always know what's important about their background and culture. They don't know what to tell you, so I assume you get to know families too. And can you talk a little bit about how teachers of young students can really get to know them? And if anybody else wants to jump in with their own techniques, that's fine too.
Yeah. Of course, young children are very open to sharing a lot with you as their teacher, especially once they get to know you a little bit, and that sort of newness of the situation of school has sort of worn off just a little bit. But it's incredibly important, in my opinion, to really get to know children's families, especially at 5 years of age. Children are coming out into the classroom, and they see me, for example, this white guy in their classroom, and there may be lots of different reactions to seeing me there. And one of the ways that I can sort of build the trust with children is to get to know their families really, really well, and work really, really hard at getting to know their families, so that I can then say, hey family, would you like to come on into the classroom and share something about you know, the special kind of birthday celebration that your child just told us about? And if I have that relationship already built to one degree or another, the chances of family members saying, oh yeah, definitely, I'll come on in and sit down, and would you like me to bring, you know, some food, or I can read a book too, or I've got these things that represent what my family, my community, or my culture does for birthday celebrations. Can I bring those in as well? So it's building that trust with the family that helps me to then make that connection stronger with my children. And once the children in the classroom see that, oh, teacher knows my mom, teacher knows grandma, it's a lot, I'm able to sort of draw forth from the children a lot more of what it is that they already know, but are perhaps hesitant to share, or don't quite yet know how it is to share that.
Sure. Lawrence?
One of the things is sometimes it's strange, right? Like, what do you want to come to my house for? So I know that idea of the informal is very powerful, right? And so, I mean, the cheese man spreads a lot, and the gossip, right? And so what I do is I use that as a tool, right? And so maybe someone has invited me over, and then, you know, I come back and I blow it up to the students. Oh, I was just at so-and-so's house, and they had the best pozole, right? Then all of a sudden, oh no, Mom, Mr. Tan said so-and-so had better pozole. Man, you better show them what's up. And so, like, you get the invites, and I might have some tamale battles, right? You know, so, but then you blow it up, and then you ease the tension, right? And, you know, it's so informal, but, you know, definitely inviting them to open, you know, as much. And the problem is, a lot of times my colleagues will complain, like, oh, the parents don't come, because they're extending, like, here's your parent conference at 2:30, right? Well, I tell my kids, it's like Burger King, have it your way. Like, if you want to come at 7, then let's schedule it. Not, you know, extend, minimize the excuse, and I'll come to your house if you want. They're like, oh, no, I'll be there at, like, you know, 7 o'clock. But one thing I will say is that parents have often told me that it gets harder in middle school and high school, because as a parent, it's easy in elementary to be involved, I know what to do, but like at middle school, high school, that's a scary thing for the kids and the parents. So maybe y'all can share.
I like that, the old Burger King technique.
Like
That's good. Anna, can you talk a little bit more about Indian education for all? That's something I didn't really know about, and I'm sure a lot of people here don't know about it either, and how that affects your teaching.
Yeah, so I'll try to give you like a 30-second history lesson. So Montana has this unique provision in the Constitution that says that education will be basically culturally responsive, that it will take into account the 12 tribes of Montana. And so we also have this actual, it's encoded in the law, mandate called Indian Education for All. And basically it just says that, I mean not just, but it says that all school K-12, pre-K, even secondary, post-secondary, will include culturally respectful, tribally informed information about American Indians. And the way that they enacted that was, first of all, through funding, and then also leaders from the 12 tribes of Montana came together and wrote up 7 essential understandings about Montana Indians. And that's kind of the go-to document for teachers wanting to incorporate for whatever subject area they're looking at, trying to incorporate authentic information into their curricula. And
So Montana's doing that, but most other places are not. And I want to make sure we get to this question, but I mean, what you all are doing is not easy. There's a reason not everyone's doing it. I think Maureen called it exotic. This is hard stuff, and I assume that a lot of you have gotten some pushback, whether that's from administrators, from other colleagues, from parents. There is pushback, and other teachers who tried to do this have not been successful. So Darnell, since you haven't spoken in a little bit, maybe you could start there and talk about what do you do when you get have you gotten pushback, and how do you stay true to this?
At my current school, we implement a model or a philosophy called constructivism, and it's inherently culturally responsive, because the idea with constructivism is you have to incorporate the students' lived experiences in what we're teaching. And our principal, Matt Underwood, has been really good about focusing on skill development and basically synthesizing development of skills with constructivism. And he's a number of times a wonderful, wonderful leader who's talked about we're not just teaching towards the test. We're focused on these habits of mind, and that philosophy comes from an organization Atlanta Neighborhood Charter is affiliated with, called the Coalition of Essential Schools. But my time before that, not so much, but I'm not going to talk too much about the time before Atlanta Neighborhood Charter.
I mean, maybe you can talk about, or somebody else, what pushback looks like when you have had it.
Well, I think I'm going to take a little bit of a different angle on this, and I think it's a philosophical angle. I think that the pushback, we can talk about many things as far as what the tangible aspect of pushback is structurally, but I really think that the greatest pushback is individual pushback. I think that our greatest challenge as educators is the idea that we just don't give it all we have, because it is a calling and it is personal, and the idea that I might try everything I can and not reach a student is devastating. It's this interesting dichotomy with teachers, because in general they're such caring individuals that really want to help, and the idea that I might have my own barriers that are causing me to not teach well or not reach students, that's a frightening idea. And I don't even know if a lot of people are aware of this idea. I think when we talk about culturally responsive teaching, or we talk about stereotypes and how we deal with our own feeling about students, we don't look at a classroom. I know that there's a lot of teachers that say, oh, I just love all my students. Really? Do you really? I mean, you might, hopefully we can get to a point to like them all, but the idea that I'm going to walk in and immediately love all these children is
Maybe
just
not all
not
on the
true.
same day. Maybe
Back me up here, guys.
Not all on the same day,
right? But
plus or minus.
We have to be brutally honest with ourselves, with our own values, our own ideology, in order to acknowledge that we can teach them, and we have to teach them differently. And it's much easier to blame certain things. Certainly we can blame parental involvement. That's a conversation that's been going on, my entire life. We can blame these factors, and I'm not taking away from these other factors. But for me to go in every day and try as best as I can and still not reach them all, at the end of the day I have to live with that. and make peace with that. And that's I think, our greatest challenge. And I guess the best example, I like my athletic analogies, and then I'll close with this, but I'm very passionate about this because I think this is what teaching tolerance stands for. We just lost 2 days ago a district playoff game. I'm still hurting from this. But the boys, it's our rival. And during the course of the season, they would talk about the refs. They would talk about, we lost because the refs were so bad, or we lost because they played dirty. And they were valid excuses. But the bottom line is, you didn't give it all you have. In this playoff game, they were amazing, and they left it all on the field, and it got me thinking. And as I talked to them afterwards, I said, look, this hurts right now, and it probably hurts more than any other loss because you gave it all you have. But when the pain goes away, it's going to be replaced with pride. Whereas when we live our lives with excuses and blame and things that are easier to define, when time goes by, that's replaced with regret. And so I really think that is our greatest challenge as educators.
Go ahead, Lawrence. You want to add?
Okay, a couple things on pushback. For teachers, they push back because it's another layer of already these things that are on top of. So if it's something that can be very accessible to them, they're more open, and you show me what to do, and that's number one. Like, if it's accessible to them and then what they're daily, they're more open to do it, right? Pushback from administrators in terms of at least Southern California, LAUSD. I mean, I don't know Atlanta. I wish we were Atlanta with that philosophy. But pushback from administration comes in the form of, are you being effective? And unfortunately, effectiveness right now is test scores, right? Mm-hmm. And so if like basically my principal said, as long as you're effective, I don't care, like you can do, have some liberties, right? But the moment you become ineffective because you're only as good as your last test score, you have to fall in line. And so that's kind of what happens is, like, you have a lot of teachers coming out and they want to try these things, but then how can they back it up and show that, and do they have time to show that whatever they're implementing is effective, and how do they prove effectiveness in this academic growth over time, AGT stuff? Well,
I'll throw this out. How do you all judge your own effectiveness? Maybe your principal's looking at your test scores, but is that what you're looking at? Or how do you know this is working?
I mean, my students get the test scores. That allows us to do the other things. So I don't care. I told my principal I don't care about the test scores, but I also understand the game that's been being played. But let me show you we can get the test scores, even though we're doing this kind of, critical curriculum or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Darnell. It seemed like you wanted to say something.
Okay, I don't know how PC I should be about this, but the people implementing the test, can they pass the test themselves? The people who are saying, like the business people who are controlling districts and saying students need to be tested and this is how they need to be measured, can they themselves pass those tests? And what does it really show? Just a combination of facts that might not even be relevant to their lives after 20 years. Like, can they use this information that they're being tested on in a meaningful way? Are we measuring success in education by how well someone can internalize these random facts? Or should we measure education by how well students can use the knowledge that they gain in education and to develop a deeper understanding of the world? It's incredibly, incredibly frustrating when schools, the high school I went to, was amazing in shaping who I am today, was closed down because it was considered low performing. I feel like I came out okay, but how can we measure what students' intelligence by these arbitrary tests? And historically, tests have always been, first of all, culturally biased and inherently racist, and we're using this as a measurement of what students can do and are able to do and what they know. It's really ridiculous to me.
Yeah, and one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly.
Well, we only have a couple more minutes before Q&A, but let's move in from there into the Common Core. They're going to talk more about this in the next panel, but I want to hear teachers' perspectives. Do you think the Common Core leaves room for you to continue doing your culturally responsive teaching and all of that in the local literature and all those things that you're incorporating, or are you nervous about it? Whoever wants to start.
Really quickly, I mean, I kind of have dealt with that because I have English language learners. So, if I'm going to be teaching Julius Caesar or something. I mean, when people are coming from these other countries, they immediately are like, what is that? So I think with the Common Core, as teachers, we have to ask ourselves, why is this important? And if we can't answer that with our own content, I think the answer will give us the culturally responsive approach, a methodology to which we can actually implement the Common Core. So I do see the benefit. There are benefits to it to keep it consistent, but find the humanity in it. That's the whole idea between being culturally responsive is where's the humanity in what we're doing? Where's the humanity in that test that you were talking about? And if we can take it from that angle, and we can make it meaningful for the students.
So you're saying teach the Common Core from a culturally responsive lens.
Absolutely.
Robert, did you want to add something?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that the Common Core will the way that it's implemented in individual classrooms or individual schools will only be as good as the teachers who are putting their heads together in order to infuse a culturally responsive practices or ensure that whatever it is that they're devising under the Common Core is going to provide the most equitable sort of access to all of their students. And I think that it's really, really critically important for us as we sort of enter into the Common Core era to really realize that collaboration is going to be really, really, really important. I think that far too many times we as educators just shut our doors and do what we will, which is really great if you're going to be someone like Lawrence who is really infusing lots of fantastic culturally responsive strategies and practices into what it is that he's doing, but perhaps more difficult for folks who, for one reason or another, are encountering those personal sort of blockages. How is I don't know if I can personally get past my whatever it may be, racism, for example, or recognizing that there is institutional racism. How is it that I can overcome that in order to effectively reach and teach all of my students? So I think that the Common Core really will lend itself well, but only to the degree that teachers are cognizant of the fact that they're going to have to put into
There's change.
Yeah, put into the Common Core their culturally responsive practices.
Anybody else before we have 1 minute before I head to Q&A? Did you want to say something?
I'm just going to say, no matter what they throw in front of me, I'm going to freak the mess out of that. Because you have to. You have to. I mean, seriously, you have to adapt. The landscape of teaching changes. In the course of the 12 years that I'm teaching, it was Common Core, whatever. I mean, you have to. And it's imperative that, and that's the thing, that's the scary part for teachers. So how do we support people so that they can freak the mess out of that? You know what I'm saying? You just got to.
To remember, it's a core. It's not the everything.
Yeah.
But Common Core is pushing away from this personal narrative and into text-based questioning and all of this. So do you still have time to have kids write their stories and tell their stories when you have to teach these standards?
Yeah, because you don't. I mean, you can do it. You can do both, right? Like they can write and then they can investigate their own writing, or they can investigate someone else's writing, or I mean, it's just to me. I was all fired up about the test scores, and now I'm like mellow on the Common Core because I think they're skills, and I think that the skills actually mesh with culturally responsive teaching quite nicely because they do focus on critical literacy, and I think that that people who are teaching well are probably already doing pretty much what the core is asking them to do.
You got 10 seconds, Matthew?
Go for it.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's a lot of positivity on this stage. It's
And we have to be supportive of teachers, though, because we have to understand that this is change.
Yeah.
And there's too many times for teachers across the board, it's boom, here's change, boom, here's your evaluation, and it's still people. They're not robots either. So we have to be supportive and understand that people handle change differently, and some people are going to need more support and more development, around them. And the collaboration is going to be key, not just with how we teach, but our peer collaboration.
So I have a million more questions, but I'm going to throw it out to you all. Go ahead, and if you have a question, we have a mic runner. Somebody will come and bring you a mic. Go ahead and stand up and state your name and your affiliation. And also, this is the time for our virtual audience to be sending in questions, and we'll take those as well. So looks like we have one over here.
I know.
What?
Can't see you through that screen.
Hi. Is this on?
Yes, we can.
I'm Dr. Christine Morano-McGee, and I'm lead faculty in bilingual special education at George Washington University. And in my capacity, we have a program that does train teachers in cultural competence. I'm wondering, you all mentioned your education, but I didn't hear anyone say that they had formalized training in cultural competencies. And I was just wondering if you did receive training in cultural competencies and what your school systems or your schools are doing individually to foster the wonderful work that you're doing.
That's a good question. Who wants to start?
I can start. Going back to the guy who got me into teaching, Bill Johnson, I wasn't planning on being a teacher. I was planning on going into law or PhD, something like that. But I stepped into his class, the craft of teaching or something. And the first book that he gave me was Other People's Children by Lisa Delpit. And it was amazing because it spoke so much to my own experience as a student. And I wanted to implement some of those theories and some of those ideologies into my own classroom. So we read Lisa Delpit, we read Sonia Nieto, we read Bell Hooks, we read people who look like me and people who've experienced the same things like me. And those like teaching philosophies and those ideologies pushed me to apply my Africana Studies degree in a meaningful way and not just get lost in academia somewhere. No offense to any academics, but seeing myself in the college curriculum really pushed me to become a teacher.
It's really wonderful because, as we know, Lisa and Sonia are both in the room.
Yep.
So it's pretty amazing. Anybody else want to speak to that?
I think life, if we really look at it, can teach us to be, culturally competent educators just by living that. Personally, I think going to the University of San Francisco in such a city, but it's a Jesuit university, that in and of itself lends it to be culturally competent. But I was very fortunate to be trained with a woman named Ira Sengupta out of Washington with cultural competency in the health and human services, and do some trainings with that. And I applied it to education, and I apply it to educators. And I actually, in Palm Beach County, we created a community group toward a more perfect union at one point. And we really tried to reach out with the community and do consulting and do trainings and activities around race relations and just cultural competence in general. It's definitely a need for it on a large scale.
We have a question from the virtual audience.
Yeah, this is kind of related, actually, so it's a good follow-up. How do you share your philosophy, teaching style, and successes with your peers so that there's consistency across your school?
That's a good question.
Well, I run inquiry groups, or I'm a collaborative with some different, not only teachers in my school, but other schools, and I'm a part of an organization of educators called the People's Education Movement, and other things, and we try to spread it around. I try to really, it's not just about me, or I really try to work with all the not only my fifth graders, but the other schools, and then the schools around it. So it's really it's something you have to kind of do is really network, because teaching has become a very isolating job, and how do you have to share with others, and so definitely more groups of teachers in and around schools.
I think in a small school like where I work, I mean, I don't consider myself a leader, and I think that what we do is we collaborate, we come together. People will come to me and ask me questions, where did you get this material, or how would you implement this concept in your classroom? And I think we also have a mentorship cadre that we've been having for several years, and maybe I just any kinds of those like little community building efforts within your own school can make a huge difference. Big school, small school, whatever.
I think we had another question over here. Get the mic over to you.
Coming.
Sure, hold on, we got the mic coming. Make sure we can hear you.
I'm Sue Klein from the Feminist Majority Foundation, and I used to work a while ago at the Department of Education in the research offices, focusing on teacher evaluations in part, and with all the emphasis on teacher evaluations, aside from this good recognition from teaching tolerance, I was wondering, in the evaluation criteria for you all as teachers, to what extent do they ask, and is it an important criteria that you treat your students in a culturally responsive way, and that you know and practice avoiding discrimination on the basis of sex and other things?
You want to start, Robert?
I feel like in San Francisco Unified that there is a recognition of the fact that that it's important for teachers to be culturally relevant and aware of how it is that they are reaching the diverse student population in our city. I'll be honest, in any evaluations that I have had of late, I cannot recall whether that has been a topic of discussion. Yeah.
It's a fair answer.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Well, I think that, again, as far as the conversation, if you ask people, most of them will say that they are culturally competent. And so the conversation relies on, it's like, yes, oh, absolutely, what do you mean? But then the details might sound like, well, I don't see color. I'm culturally competent. I mean, so, right? And, or I treat all my students the same, or I love them all. We've already visited that comment. So, it's what does it look like, I think needs to be the conversation. What does being culturally competent look like to you? What does equitable mean to you? And then what does that look like in your classroom, and why? That's the conversation.
Another question over here.
Thank you. I'm Tina Hone. I'm a former school board member in Fairfax County, which is a very affluent, successful county not far from here. I'm so inspired by all of you. Made me drive through the snow. I mean, I was in tears for every film. So
Thank you.
just incredibly inspired. But part of this conversation, and some of this is also to the teaching tolerance group, is you guys are like on the front lines. You don't have air cover from your school boards and your superintendents. The fact that it's not on your evaluation is proof that sort of your school boards and your superintendents are not placing a value on this. Fairfax County cut in its budget cultural competency training.
Yeah.
And we're a majority minority school district. And the consequences of that are well known. We filed a civil rights complaint against Fairfax County for some of its discrimination at upper level academics. How different would it be as a system, and what thoughts do you have if instead of you all just being in the trenches, you actually had school board members, superintendents, people in the leadership of your system pushing this down as something that all of your peers should want to do?
I just want to say this really quickly, and then I definitely want to share it, but I think it's very, very important, but on that kind of a policy level, it's even more important that once that decision is made, that things are put in place to train the teachers. Part of the pushback that we see, the tangible pushback, is too many things are put on the teachers and they have to do them tomorrow, and yet it hasn't even been well thought out. And they're caught all the time, and then something new comes up. So I absolutely would make all the difference. They're policymakers. But then there has to be a plan for the implementation of it. And I think you're going to see test scores rise.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I think a lot gets placed on those district, whatever you call them. A lot gets placed on those educational policymakers, but where do they get those cultural values and those cultural attitudes from? And I said this earlier, but we have to start reevaluating our society as a whole and what we value as a culture. Do we value cultural competency beyond the education system? What does it mean to dress professionally? And what does it mean to be viewed as being intelligent beyond education? We're socialized to believe that we have to act and look a certain way in order to be accepted in dominant cultural spaces. And that influences the educational system. So we have to evaluate different institutions, other institutions, and not just education. We have to evaluate the media. Where do people get ideas of what it means to be intelligent from? There's the media, there's business, there's religion. There's all of these institutions that come together and inform these policies in education that we need to address too.
Awesome. It's a lot bigger than that.
Another one from the virtual audience. Couple. So this one says, kids are born tolerant. How, as educators, can we prevent them from becoming prejudiced? It's kind of central.
Put them all in a spaceship, ship them off for 20 years, bring them back, they'll be great.
Well, as a kindergarten teacher, I think it's incredibly important for all teachers of young children in particular to just really ensure that the space that they're creating is one where kids are always recognizing the fact that they're all a part of a community together, that and I know that it's going to sound a little simple to all of us here, but in the kindergarten world, even just getting to know each other's names is really, really important. And not just knowing their names, but knowing how to pronounce each other's names correctly. So in those very simple sort of rudimentary basic ways, beginning that sort of sense of we're all in this together and we all need to help each other and support each other.
So
Sure.
kind of like what Darnell says, the kids are learning from all over, right? It's billboards, it's media, and so one of the things, like, that's why I use a lot of media, is that we have to give them tools so that they can continue to make sense, because they're going to make sense with or without help, right? If you want to say that videos or video games is taboo, like you can't touch that, well, they're already participating in it. So how do you give them the tools to help them navigate something that's ingrained in them and continually they're immersed in? So that's one thing.
One more time for one more question. So.
Good evening. Congratulations to you, Ashley.
Thank you.
My name is Carlotta Fellows. I'm a school board representative from Prince George's County, just newly elected. I'm also a former teacher. One of the things I wanted to ask you is about policy and your influence on policy. Do you believe that you have some kind of influence on policy as the people, again, who are on the front lines? And if so, how have you had some influence on policy within your districts?
You might have more influence now after this. Let's hear.
Honestly,
Staying away from
Lauren
policy.
Yeah. It's interesting. Go ahead and say what.
I feel like I have very little influence on policy, and even when I organize with other organizations, it's an uphill battle, and then you're looked on as the rabble rouser, right? And so honestly, at this stage of the way the structures of policy and education are, the teacher is very powerless at this point. And when they get together, then they become threats, and then they start to move you, and then they start to pick you apart and look at all your flaws, right? So it's kind of like it's a machine, and right now they stamp you out.
You're a cog.
Well, if I can just add a positive twist on that, yes, I totally agree, except in my classroom. It's not in my district, it's in my classroom. I am the policymaker, and I am the policy enactor, and so if I want to live what I believe, as Gandhi said, that's where I'm going to do it, and that's where I'm going to encourage my students to do the same.
I really hate to cut you guys off. Last comment from Lisa.
I do think because we talked a little bit about this with administrators and board members. There's got to be some transition where people feel comfortable talking to their administrators, talking to their school board members without retribution. I think this happens anywhere. You may, as a newly elected board member, and obviously with your question, you really want to know. But if I am a teacher in your school district, I might not want to tell you because I don't know how that's going to translate. And there has to be a comfortable dialogue that is set up so that teachers can also feel empowered. Because honestly, policymakers out there, you empower your teachers, you do empower the world. When we feel like our administrators are behind, I have a wonderful administration. I feel like I can do anything. That makes such a difference from perhaps where you were last time, I don't know.
We don't
But,
need to talk.
and you have the power and authority to actually try to set that up, whatever that might look like. and have that dialogue with people so that you can really get good input, so that we can continue to move forward. But there has to be that transition made. The best of intentions, you know, people might not either feel powerless or be afraid to tell you the truth.
Policymakers need to be culturally responsive as well.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you guys so much. Thank you all to our award winners for such a fascinating discussion. I think I can safely say for being an inspiration to everyone here. And thank you all for participating as well.
Thank you.